All right, we're live. All right, guys. So we are wrapping up the summer tour with this chat. Ended, I don't know, a week ago or so. 25-ish shows. Everyone on this got to see at least one or more. The people joining us, we have a couple of new locations from previous guests. Brian Brinkman, Suffering Juke, is joining us from Chicago. Hi, Brian.
How we doing?
Rob Mitchum also joining us from Chicago, but not in the same room as Brian.
Yeah, that might have been easier technically, though.
Rob's at Fish Crit. Wally is joining us from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Wally?
Leave me alone.
Wally's at Wax Banks. And I'm RJ from HF Pod. There's someone else here who looks like Wolverine. I'm not sure who that is, but we'll hear from him soon enough. So guys, thanks for joining. Let's just start, I guess, by going around and saying what your sort of high-level impressions are of Summer Tour, what your biggest takeaways were, and we'll let the conversation evolve from there. I will tell people who are watching that we might have some charts, and we might have some numbers, and we might have some data to introduce later, courtesy of Rob. But right now, let's get into it just with some sort of thoughts about Summer Tour and how you think it went and big takeaways. Rob or Brian, one of you guys want to start?
I can go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I feel a little bad now that I wrote a post after Chicago that said, admitted I was maybe wrong about it being a transitional year. Though I guess I kind of said that I was right. It just was a better transitional year than I thought it would be. I think after the second half of tour, it seemed more transitional in the way that I thought it was going to be before Summer Tour started. And again, it's not necessarily like that's a good or bad thing. I just think that sometimes it's an awkward thing, and I think it's definitely a tour that is really hard for us to put a wrapper on, to put a narrative on. Much more so than previous tours in 3.0, which definitely felt like they were, climbing towards this peak that we hoped was going to be there, and that they kind of hit late summer, fall. This tour, I think a lot of people enjoyed it, but I don't think anybody feels like it's a peak. I think it really is this kind of like in-between space, and in a lot of ways I think it's a lot more interesting for that. But I'm not, running up and down the street saying it was the greatest tour ever, I guess.
That's fair. Well, so Brian, is the not having a narrative to wrap around this tour, is that tough for writers like you all?
I'm sorry?
Rob said this tour doesn't necessarily have a tightly sort of woven narrative that you can tell. What's your take on that? Has that made it harder to write about or to think about? Or do you disagree?
I haven't written anything about it. What's that?
Go ahead. Go for it.
I haven't written anything. I haven't thus far written anything about this tour, almost on purpose. Part of it's been I've had a lot of personal stuff going on coming back to America. I was doing a ton of traveling, kind of getting settled in a totally different place. I kind of looked at this tour as more on a personal level to get reacquainted with friends and family who I saw a bunch of shows with. I've thought a lot about it, and I think that Rob's definitely right. It's harder to think about this tour than it is past ones, in the sense that you've got these two different dynamics going on in the first 2 weeks of the tour and the last 2 weeks of the tour. And there's such a clear shift that there's, last year was so much clearly this message being sent from the band leading up to Wingsuit and then up to the New Year's celebration. The no covers, New Year's Eve set, everything. If you look back on it, there's kind of a clear progression there. This year was definitely a lot harder to read. The high points of it, it's weird. There have been people that have said the high points come in the first 2 weeks of the tour. There are other people that say they come in the last 2 weeks. I think that there's kind of a split between that. I think it's just different high points. The band seemed to want two completely different approaches, at least from how I was hearing it. And so you don't have the natural, they start off, set some foundations, and then build naturally over the course of a tour. They were really hot out the gates. then they shifted, at least is what it sounds like, and then they built upon that shift in like the third week of tour, and then the last 3 shows off from what it's been. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just, yeah, it makes it a little bit harder to revisit it and understand it.
Fair enough. Wally, you saw the first show, and that was it, right? You're on mute, Wally, I think.
Now
There you go.
in my back. Yeah, I'm an old homebody, so I don't get to see shows anymore. So I see a tour, give or take. And it was I went with an old friend of mine who's been to like 50 or 60 shows, and he's been seeing shows since they were supporting Santana. And he toured in 1999. We left the show, both of us just floating on air. And both of us, we talked on the way home. We listened to a bunch of old Grateful Dead on the way home, like late career Grateful Dead actually, and some Frank Zappa. And the music on the way home weirdly just seemed perfect. It just seemed kind of this ideal continuation of what had happened. And after the show, we both agreed, like we both found ourselves confessing, the way guys do late at night, that everything about the evening had just been perfect, that it had been exactly what we wanted for reasons neither of us could articulate. And I think that actually is part of the not narrativizing, is that it's just they're just back to being this reliably amazing band who happen not to be playing in the same style they were playing in 15 years ago when he and I were seeing more of our shows, but they've just hit a level now where they seem to be able to do all the things that they want to do, and that's hard to talk about because conflict is the essence of drama, right? There's nothing to fight about. There's nothing particularly hard to figure out other than what are they going to play next, which we don't need to figure that out. We'll find out. That will be empirically demonstrated pretty soon. It's just been. It's a really, really goddamn good time to be a Phish fan. And it's a really bad time to be invested in bickering in the Phish fan community, which some percentage of this pretentious critic chat is, or has been. Me not least. Yeah.
Fair, yeah. Well, I mean, I know, Zach, you said before, or you said today on Twitter, and we've all said before that, as fans, we're always going to be critics in some way or another, and we can get into some of that stuff. But Zach, what's your sort of takeaway from the tour and what you saw and what you heard?
I thought the summer tour was fantastic. I saw the first big bit, Mansfield through Randall's, and felt blessed to be there. Even Mansfield, there's all this tour opener kind of tension, and what are they going to do? Is it going to be a warm-up? I was lucky enough to catch Wally for the first set stash and a little bit of the first set, and we really liked that stash. And I got to see Wally dance around and met his friend that he was mentioning. It was a sweetheart, and it was really special for that reason. And I think the second set, kind of definitely got there. Not just for a tour opener. I think everyone walked out of that show feeling really good. Rob said a minute ago that nobody's saying that this was a peak tour. I probably won't. I don't know what a peak tour is. Fall '97, fall 2013, a bunch of others. Obviously December '95 and some '94, '93, and whatever. I felt personally that by the end of Randall's, I felt that they had, for my personal biased tastes, which are like some of the other writers out there, long, deep improvisations, I left Randall's 3 feeling like I don't need to see any more shows right now, and I didn't. The only other show I caught, luckily, was the Sunday night at MPP. I'll be at Dick's because I'm now in Denver, obviously, so it'll be a hometown show. But I left Randall's 3 feeling like that's it. Like, I got everything I needed from these guys. And I thought it was really curious how they shifted. what obviously not being on tour after MPP2, I have to say that it's a disclaimer and it matters. There are people who are on full tour, and I respect them for their commitment. And I think it gives them an edge in writing about the music and the feel and the vibe and the style that I can't pick up either streaming it or webcasting it or listening even 4 or 5 times like I have to the second set of Alpharetta. But I will tell you this, what I could detect, and this might be just wrong, and it might be my own personal things, but what I fully felt was that despite the fact that after Randall's there was a lack of deep, long-form improvisations like the 26-minute Chalk Dust or the 25-minute Man Fuego or the 20 minutes Back Fuego or the light, Chalk Dust Light tweezer from Randall's, that there was even more excitement, particularly after MPP2, for that last run. That people were really excited to see the set list come in every night. There were more bust outs. There were more interesting segues. The second sets and first sets seemed to have more flow, and that frankly by Alpharetta, by the last night of the tour, I got a sense that people were just didn't really care that much that there weren't 25-minute jams because the second sets were really exciting, and I looked at this. I didn't listen to Sunday Night in Alpharetta while it was happening, but it seemed like that was like a whole spiritual kind of show with Hood, with Light, with Vultures and Fast Enough for You in the first set, and the rest of the second set, which seemed to, they weren't giant jams, but as Wally has pointed out, the 13 minutes of Chalk Dust could have been a 20-minute jam, and it didn't need to be. And if they do that and they don't play Sing Monica like they did at Randall's because there's a more undulant, curvilinear set, that people are just like really excited. You knew Hood was coming, and you knew Light was probably going to come late in the set. It was just like awesome. So peak tour, not peak tour. No, probably not a peak tour. I could agree with Rob there. I also think that I would agree with Rob on the idea of a pivot, and I think to me, and I'm writing a piece now that's going to be titled Precisely Divided. I mean, they encored with Julius, like 5 nights in a row or something? Or Julius, to me, is the message that they've hammered home maybe a little too frequently, that we're on the cusp between your past and your present, and this is of a piece maybe not as succinct as Garden Party, Chicago Harpua, Tahoe Tweezer, Wingsuit, Gem Set, but to me this is another point in that narrative that they've strewn now for a few years, and yeah, I mean, I think that I'd leave it at that. Yeah.
Brian and Rob, you guys saw Chicago and then didn't see any more after that, and a lot of people thought that several people have said that the tour kind of changed after Chicago, and maybe this gets into the analysis that we were emailing about. But Rob, what's your take on whether things did change after Chicago or not, and in what way?
I put it even earlier. I would say that it did change after Randall's, because I kind of feel like Detroit was kind of like a failed version of what they were trying to do later in the tour, to my mind. And then Chicago, I think, was where you with like the Piper Haleys on the first night, and definitely the Wedge on the third night. It's where you started to, I think, see the development of what was going to happen for the rest of the tour. And I don't think the second night of Merriweather would have happened without Piper's Haley, for instance, or especially without the Weird Ghost reprise in the Weekapaug on the third night of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
That was the kind of thing that they did, throughout the rest of the tour almost. Those sort of sudden full band reprises in the middle of jams, which was a cool trick. I think it did, and it's weird because it does seem like there's some misalignment between what the band thinks is a successful show and what fans do. And I think there's even different opinions within the band about what a successful show is. Like, I thought it was really interesting when the way Mike talked about Randall's 3 in his blog post.
Yep.
He singled it out as a show that he really liked and that he felt like had, what was his word, spring?
Swung.
Yeah.
And then swung.
So he singled that one out as like, that was the one that everybody liked. And I don't think he meant the band in that sense. I think he meant like that was the one that they were hearing from all the fans really liked.
Yeah, exactly.
And I always feel like Mike is the one that pushes them towards deeper exploration at this point in their where they are at now. But yeah, I think the rest of the band doesn't necessarily feel like those very long, deep jam shows is where they want to be right now, and I think that's fine because, like, to be honest, I think it's just as exciting to see like a Merriweather 2. And it's just as exciting to see some of these like experiments that went on within sets that were, you wouldn't have seen earlier in 3.0. Things like a jammed out wedge. Things like, the Boogie Lope was kind of like a classically fishy thing, but I thought that the way that it came together sounded different than they normally do when they like sort of combine two songs together. I don't know. I felt like the second half of tour was when they really started probing where one song begins and another ends, and seeing the bleed between those boundaries. And I think it had a lot to do with introducing this like chunk of new material into the catalog. And once they like sort of worked those into the places that they were supposed to go, and I don't think that's complete yet, but they got to a place of comfort with some of the songs.
Yep.
They started re-examining where other songs, older songs, fit and how they fit together. And I think that's where you got the most interesting conflict and results from this summer.
If you don't mind jumping in, I feel like we don't actually go, and obviously I can't speak for everybody, but I don't anymore go to these shows hoping to hear, needing to hear a specific style, or even expecting to hear a specific style. I'm prey to that just like everybody else is, everybody else ever has been. But I feel like when you're in the presence of an enlightened person, and I feel like Phish together, when they're in the music, are a kind of enlightened macroorganism. That's how they feel to me, whatever their individual levels of having their shit together. Like when you're in the presence of someone who is just floating, just whatever it is that they do is imbued with an energy which is itself the appeal. And I feel like whatever style or genre or set of formal parameters Phish are exploring on a given night, if they're really feeling it, then it doesn't matter what kind of show you end up with. The experience of the show will be filled up with something extraordinary that is the substance of the experience for everybody. And then everybody who talks about the incredible time they had at the show, if you weren't there, you're going to bicker. Like, how could you possibly have enjoyed? When people talk about the third Randall show, I just listened to it tonight, and I'm like, that tweezer is sloppy. It's boring. They're lost for a while. Phish throws the entire band for a loop by playing this fucking mound beat for a second. Like, I know he's playing a 3-3-2 a couple of times, and they like. The formal parameters of the thing end up being kind of ridiculous. But if they come into it with a good heart, then whatever you think of it formally and structurally, you're going to have felt the good heart. And I feel like the whole second half of tour, they're just floating, right? And that's what comes through the music. And so like the last show of tour, I don't know if people are going to talk about it as a fantastic show, but watching it felt like a religious sacrament to me because they were just so full of one another. And so when Trey was walking around to duet during Harry Hood with everybody, it's that's not going to produce anything particularly deep. But what it produced for me was these people love each other, and I got to watch smart, alive, involved, brave people who love each other staring into one another's eyes for like 2 minutes at a time and letting everybody in the audience be a part of that. And that was fucking glorious.
While they were doing that, the Mike Trey duet, solo duet, whatever. They were doing that over throughout tour, whether it was during YEMs or other songs.
Really?
And I remember they did it during the first set YEM at MPP, and I personally got the feeling that it was Trey's way of elevating Mike. I've never really seen Trey, I've seen him vamp Page, during like Yamars and other stuff where he'll walk over to Page and kind of do his little bounce thing and try to, syncopate with Page or just kind of Leo. But I felt like, and maybe this is part of like Mike's growth and evolution, and I think the external stuff like the clothing and the swag and the swagger that he has and the scarves and the funny tweets and the Instagrams and the selfies are just like an external manifestation of that. But I think internally, Trey has to be recognizing that whether it's Mike's new album, whether it was his tour, which he probably showed up at Phish practice, or they were in communication during that tour, that Mike was super happy, excited to be running his own thing, that they fully enveloped this process of creative, and I think Fuego Wingsuit is a part of this truly collaborative. I mean, it's possible that it took them 30 years to really learn how to do it. And I remember reading an article from Mike a few years ago about saying, like, it wasn't until I had my own band when I truly realized how difficult Trey's job is. And I don't want that job with Phish. Whereas I think maybe in 98, 99, 2000, and maybe in earlier parts of 2.0 and 3.0, that Mike was still like, fuck, this is not Trey, like, this is Trey's band, and I want it to be my band. And so I think Mike, with a few more tours under his belt, a new album, and his just personal confidence and his swagger and his etc. That Trey duetting and soloing with Mike, to me, just seemed to be like, you're front and center with me now too, and that kind of thing. I wouldn't trade that. I wouldn't trade seeing that for anything.
I took it in a similar way to what Wally's saying. I remember watching it and kind of feeling emotional, knowing the tour was coming to an end. Of course, they're playing Harry Hood. That is always going to fill someone who loves that song up with a whole lot of emotion. But it reminded me the only time I'd ever seen that happen at a Phish show was at Coventry, the first night at Coventry, when Trey and Mike got out on the rocks in front of the stage there. There were all those rocks.
Yeah.
Right at
That
the
was
stage.
so ridiculous, though. And Brian, our friend Ingest CJ just tweeted that exact same thing right before you said it, so he was thinking the exact same thing. Just continue.
So the whole reason I bring it up is, my mom gave me a Phish calendar when I was like 17 years old, right after I got back home from Coventry, that had a picture of that on it, and I always had it on my wall. When it passed, 2005 or whatever it was, I tore it out and I put it up on my wall because the way that they're positioned, it looks so tragic. Trey is so hunched over at that time. And Mike, you can see, and you could tell during 2.0, there was a big push towards, and I know that this started in 97, with People for a Louder Mike. But in 2.0, there was this big push from fans that I was coming up with, who were bigger fans of Mike than they were of Trey. And you could tell during the latter parts of 2004 especially that Mike had kind of become the driving force of the band. Trey was still the front man, but that picture shows this kind of broken man almost apologizing to Mike, who didn't want to break the band up at all. He wanted to continue Phish at that point. And, I don't seek to think that there's really a ton of comparison between the two, 2004, 2014, the fact that it's a 10-year anniversary. But it kind of made me think of that here they are now, they're healthy, they've completely revived their friendships, the band is on a completely different level than it was in 2004. It's totally functional, healthy, producing new music, and like Wally was saying, regardless what type of show you see, you know that you're seeing, aside from maybe the Detroit show, a great show. I don't know. There was something full circle that came with seeing Trey and Mike, and then going over to Fish and Page compared to what I saw in 2004?
Yeah. Well, that was my wife was like that was the most disgusting thing to her. I think of all of Coventry was the like I'm gonna stand out on the rocks so you guys can go talk about how it sounds like back at the campground or whatever. It was just it was such a moment of like disaster and just lack of self-awareness that I don't think we've seen. We didn't see to that date and since, you know. And this was like this tour was the opposite of that. I mean, I don't know. It's all come around at this point, but it's an interesting.
What do you guys? Can I recenter us for a second on the Julius part, on the Precisely Divided? I mean,
yeah, man, it's your podcast. Do whatever you want.
Okay, cool. I mean, Rob, you said the word limbo. I don't disagree, but the only part I would disagree with you on, I agree it's limbo. Isn't that exactly where they are wannabe? Not to say that you implied that it's a bad thing, but like to me, and you're a great critic, and I respect you. Like, shouldn't they be in limbo right now? Shouldn't, with a fall tour, with a New Year's, and there's been some rumors about potentially taking a break. I don't know if anybody else has heard that, but I've definitely heard that from a few. I'm not a rumor monger, but you know, like a positive break, like a hey, we love you, we're great, we're gonna take 18 months, we need a breather, we've been cooking for the last 3 years, we were so happy, we're gonna come back, of course, we're always gonna play, we have a few other things we want to take care of, and Fishman has some young kids, and we want to make sure he raises them properly. But I mean, to me, not the people who think Julius is like a piece of shit song. I love a bluesy solo from Trey, and they always seem to rip it just like backwards. But like, aren't they precisely divided with a new album, a new lease in many ways? Like with Wingsuit in the you know, I don't know if anybody caught the interview that Page and Trey did. That was like a featurette of the Letterman show. And that was a really deep interview. That, combined with the Fishman radio interview, combined with Mike's blog, or just kind of his sketches, his word sketches, combined with, you know, I think the relative success of tour, like, this is the next. If they weren't joking about 30 more years at the Jump Set, you know, when they saved the date for 2033 or 2043, like, it's conceivable if these guys stay healthy that at 75 and Phil Lesh is 72 or 73, he's still playing, that these guys could have 10 or 15 more years or 20 or 25. Isn't this about, and shouldn't they be exactly here with you know, and they talked about perhaps like retiring the Halloween prank or the Halloween stunt. I don't know if there's going to be a special set of music or a cover. I actually don't. I mean, I think there will be, but I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't. Am I reading too much into Julius? Should I not name my fucking essay Precisely Divided? I'm like doing.
I would think that's part of the reason why
I'm actually doing research on like the Aquitani, Gallic, Roman. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? I'm looking for something.
I think you're reading too much into it. But wait, but Kevin, Kevin, our good friend Kevin, OK Deadhead says, can we talk about 4.0? Is that what do you guys think about that as a concept? Are we still in a transition phase? And I guess we can't really call it 4.0 until they take a break and come back, just based on history. But musically, have they crossed over into another period from 3.0?
This probably isn't the kind of this isn't really addressing the question underlying the question he's asking, but there was a phase change in Fish's music in the mid-1990s. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, not a step change, but what amounts to a total turnover in the materials they were working with, and as much continuity as there was in their music. The band in 1989 and the band in 1999 are two different bands, two totally different bands, who happen to play the same catalog. So, you know, there's maybe we're I listened back to 2009, and there's a lot of really beautiful music, but it all feels the moments in 2009 that I will listen to for the rest of my life. Things like the Gorge show from summer 2009, the 7th of August, Blessed Day. That show to me feels a little bit like it escaped somehow into the wild. Like it's miraculous that it happened in the context of 2009. When I listen to Randall's, I'm like, oh, that's who they are now. That's what the Method is producing pretty consistently night after night. And so I feel like they're already at. We've already had a big turnover in the last few years, and I think 2011 was probably a bigger transitional year than 2014 has been in that regard.
I mean, I don't really hear much. I feel like they're if you just want to take it on an improvisational level, their improv is, to me, sounds completely different now than it did in even 2012. You still get into those like airy, blissful moments that lead to some sort of like a funk and then blues peak, but but it.
I think Zach just said feudalism. I'm not sure why.
I said mercantilism, century bourgeois economic system.
Yeah, okay.
I said mercantilism.
Go ahead,
I
Brian.
mean, it feels completely different for me. So, someone who knows more about like musicology or would probably be able to confirm if it actually does. But it to me sounds like what they're trying to do now with improv and also with setlist construction is totally different from what we were seeing in the summer of 2012. And in summer of 2012, just 2 years ago, was a clear attempt from the band to insert a bunch of random songs into the rotation and see what they did to shake up sets. And it gave them a lot of humor. It kind of allowed them to kind of joke at themselves a little bit. It led to the Fuck Your Face show. What they've been doing the last 2 years seems both self-referential and almost nostalgic and revolutionary at the same time. And it also seems completely different from each other. I mean, this year, like Zach was saying, shouldn't they be in limbo? Well, yeah, I feel like they've been in limbo ever since they put out Wingsuit. Everything's kind of been a little uneven since then, and that's a good thing. This summer didn't feel as celebratory as the fall did, nor parts of last summer. There was really no... the big jam of this year was the Randall's Chalk Dust Light and Tweezer, and that, in some ways, there's some really difficult moments to listen to throughout, especially the Chalk Dust, whereas like the Tahoe Tweezer, for example, was just a completely celebratory jam.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there a moratorium on mentions of the Tahoe Tweezer by now? I say this not as an attack, but somebody out there is furiously tweeting, "Oh, they're going on about the Tahoe fucking Tweezer again." I just wanted to rep for that guy.
Yeah, thank you, Wally. Well, so the great and loved Mike Hammett had a question, which I want to get to in a second, but
You say
That guy.
that's the word pronounced. It's Hamad. It's
we're gonna find out right now.
Hammock.
Mike,
What sort of name is it?
Mike, tell us how you pronounce your name, please.
It's like hummus.
He's been on my podcast before, Zach. Don't tell me how to pronounce his fucking name. You just Anyway, the one thing that's interesting, I think I've talked with all of you guys personally about the shows you saw this tour and the sort of what you said at the beginning, Brian, about it being more about on a personal level enjoying the shows, and I think for all 5 of us, and with the exception maybe of you, Zach, because this is a different kind of tour for you, but I think we all kind of were in a different place personally, and maybe had let go of any sort of expectations or other, just basically all expectations, and had let whatever happen might be what's sort of fueling this discussion about not having a real clear. We haven't pushed anything, I don't think, to the point where we need to have a narrative, or we need to have a story, or we need to have thoughts about their intention, because I think, at least the conversations I've had with all you guys, we're all to the point where we're just going to see shows and have fun. So that's just an observation. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I'm seeing. But I don't know if you guys have any reactions to that. Otherwise, we can get to Mike's question.
I think I'll say something about that. I've been trying to write my sort of summer tour summary essay for about a week, I guess, since the tour ended. And as I said in email to you guys, I'm struggling the most because I can't really peg the last 5 or 6 shows, the post-Merriweather leg of tour. I just can't really find like a hole to put it in. And I feel like, if anything, that was kind of the message of the tour, which was that there were these 3 defined segments, and the first one was like, all right, we're building up to Randall's, like 60 minutes of improv, people go nuts. And then the second phase of tour was, we're building up to Merriweather, we're going to do the first Tweezer Fest since like 94. Everybody's going to lose their minds over that, and everybody's going to think the next big thing is segues and crazy, unpredictable jams. And then the third chunk of tour didn't really have like a clear message to it. I mean, those first 2 are kind of the 2 sides of what makes Phish different in a lot of ways, and they satisfy, I think, 2 different portions of like the fan base. Whereas the third one was kind of a mix of the 2, but it kind of wasn't. It was kind of like a new thing, and they brought back a lot of 2.0 stuff, and they brought back a lot of ballads that they don't play. And I think there was sort of like a theme of like it being sentimental, but that's sort of loose and not really predictive of anything that's going to happen. And part of me wants to like predict what's going to happen next. There's this drive to be like, I know where Phish is going, and I can tell you in the fall it's going to be like this, and they're going to build up to this big peak, and it's going to be amazing. And part of me wants to like let the mystery linger. And so while I'm writing about it, I keep getting stuck on like trying to write about this last phase of tour. Like, do I even want to try and put it in a box? Or is it going to be something we look back at later and say, oh, that's what started there. Like, oh, those last 5 shows of the summer were the start of, blank that we can't really define yet. And it doesn't open it at all to kind of try and put a preemptive label on it in the same way that I felt like I might have after Chicago, where I said, okay, now they're going to do a lot of crazy segues. And I was right for the Merriweather weekend, and then I was kind of wrong for the rest of the tour. So, yeah.
You have the data to back it up.
For a second, RJ, do you mind terribly? I know this is your podcast.
Yeah.
I don't want to tread on your toes. I do that all day
you
long.
go right.
Cool.
Fred, Ethel, just
I
go. Work it out.
got the thought. I had the feeling that after Randall's, I thought they would just keep long jams and like it would just be like a bounty. When it didn't happen, I wasn't, for whatever reason, I wasn't disappointed. And then it felt like to me they got the point across that we can do when we want or when we feel it or when the crowd energy or the location or the geography or the day of the week calls for long-form improvisation over 2 or 3 or 1 song, that we got that out of the way, and now we've proven to you that we can do that. So shut up about we can't jam anymore, right? Just if Tahoe and Fall Tour didn't solve that for you, then shut the fuck up, right? And now we can do other things like an MPP2 night. And by the way, MPP1 I thought was fantastic, like a really modern contemporary Phish show. And then they go way back in a very contrived way. I remember the first segue from Tweezer into Back on the Train. I was like, oh God, like that was completely like, there's no way they didn't think about that. There's no way, some like dirty, drunk, crippled Wook was like hanging off of me, like right back to the pit. He's like, that Tweezer was kind of shitty and really short. And I was like, shut up. First of all, shut up. Second of all, they're going to keep playing Tweezer. So just calm.
That was me, guys, just for the record.
You can't. I'm sorry. I mean, like, I don't mind crippled Wooks. If you're crippled, I'll support you. You can lean on me, but just don't be like drifting all. Anyway, but like MPP2 is like, we'll have one of those shows, one of those Bomb Factory shows, because we can, and it's totally fun for us, and we don't give a shit. And by the way, let's not forget the first set at MPP2, which by the way, I left MPP, and I felt like 2 other things. I felt like Tahoe, which I was at, and it felt like Dick's 12, Fuck Your Face, which I was at. That's what it felt like. And I never, ever thought that I would see a show like MPP2, and the only other thing that it made me feel like was seeing Trey with Solomonde at Iridium this spring, randomly on a Thursday night, which basically cost me a relationship, by the way.
Worth it.
But it felt like, whoa, I'm seeing things I was pretty sure and had reconciled the fact that I wasn't ever going to see, like a Tweezerthon or Trey in a jazz club with 75 people. And I don't know, I got the sense that like we got the big jams out of the way. We're still going to jam, but they'll be 13 minutes instead of 18, right? But the second sets are going to be more flowy, more segues. I mean, the Ghost Weekapog, back in the Ghost Weekapog thing was like fantastic at Chicago. They had full control over the music, and it makes perfect sense to me that after Randall's, and some of the segue theatrics of DTE in Chicago that a few days later they can do an MPP too. And then by the last run of tour, it was just like spiritual. It was just like whatever. We're in the South. The first night was kind of whatever, and then Oak Mountain and Alpharetta were just like, this is what we would play if we had no pressure on us. If we truly had no pressure and we know we already got a great tour in the books and the weather participated, we would play Alpharetta 3. That's the show we would play at the end of tour. At the end of this tour, it would be exactly Alpharetta 3. We'd play Vultures, we'd play Fast Enough, and there'd be a bunch of great jams with a really good flow and a hood and a superb chalk dust to start things off and a great fourth quarter. And I'm still pissed they didn't play Show of Life.
So, but isn't this all? Aren't they more comfortable just in the entire tour because of the new songs and because of the latitude that's given them to not only master new material but also just to be comfortable with each other and with pushing the envelope a little bit?
If you don't mind jumping in, I actually think that having the new material, like having an album's worth of songs that they don't quite know what to do with, although at this point, 30 years into their career, they have a pretty good fucking intuition about where to put these songs. But Trey was building fantastic set lists when all of us were in diapers, literally. Now I forgot what the fuck I was gonna say because I started talking about diapers.
Good joke, though.
God damn it! Oh, it's that I feel.
You got the hook. You got the hook. Everyone was listening to you. Sorry.
I feel like having all this new material, they're like, you know what? This tour is gonna be figuring things out, and we are pretty comfortable with ourselves. So, and there's hundreds of thousands of people across the country who are gonna pay a lot of money to come and see us figure stuff out. That is absurd. Like, they know the absurdity of their situation and of ours. Like, the fact that we're doing a video chat to, like, dissect this ridiculous experience that is going to see a rock and roll show and to watch 4, like, grandfather-age dudes, like, sort of make it up as they go. And everybody there, I think, has to, at some level, recognize how funny all of it is. And I think they have a sense of humor about their work that can get lost when we're sort of in the weeds of analysis. And I say this despite being really excited by the fact that Big Data Fish is about to be shown to us pretty soon in this. I'm genuinely thrilled about that.
Let's get to Mike Hammond's question.
Well, actually, yeah. So Mike Hamad's question, and forgive me, Mike, I had no idea how his last name is pronounced. How the fuck is it pronounced?
He just tweeted that I was right. Hamid. It just fucking just.
Hamid?
He's wrong. Then he's wrong.
He's wrong.
So his question was, what trends are we seeing in the jams? And I feel bad that I haven't addressed Brian's earlier question. It seemed good if I remember it correctly, but don't remind me of what it was because I'm going to answer the question I think you asked. So one thing that I think I'm hearing in their improvisation right now is that they're throwing out more coherent ideas to one another. That the Trey's suggestions, like Jake's essay the other day, and by the way, if anybody watching this for some reason hasn't yet read Jake Cohen's fantastic essay about the third Randall show, it's just top flight writing about Fish. I think it's really useful and insightful and poetic.
Yeah.
So one thing that he was saying is that they're like Trey is like throwing out a lot of provisional song structures that are really well formed, and compared to, especially in the late 90s and 2.0 and the early part of 3.0, where they're just like, it's going to be rough and tumble, or like ideas are going to come out, the faucet's just going to open, and some of these ideas are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad. I think they're getting better at their like provisional structures being well formed, being worthwhile in themselves, not just because something good might come out of them, but I feel like instead of just dumping unpolished stones into the tumbler, they're able to, like, they have more taste now. Like they're more gems like coming out of them because they're better at saying no. I don't need to do this bad idea that I had 30 years ago. I don't actually need to do that again. The improvisational, I hate that word. The improvisatory imperative does not force me to play bullshit just to be true to the moment. Like, I can hold back for a few seconds, and something better is going to come up. The first cousin of my stupid idea is going to come to me, and it's going to be a better idea. And I feel like in Jake's essay, he talks about Trey quoting St. Thomas and then throwing out like a 16-bar phrase with the same structure. And I feel like they're all getting better at that. When Page will still do his thing where he sort of suggests 3 different chord progressions in 2 measures, and the Trey doesn't play any of them. But Page is also better at like playing just 1 chord progression and staying with it a little longer and being like, guys, I got this. Here's some shit, we can do this. And like Mike is, now that he runs his own band, Mike knows how much more active and melodic and upper register and in charge and assertive and gutsy and leader-like he can be while still holding down the bottom, while still doing, that job Phil Lish didn't do and so forth. And like, he's better than he's ever been at doing what Trey does, which is simultaneously serving a role in the ensemble and being a font of melodic ideas and of structural ideas. And Fishman the same. They're all just getting better at not just throwing mud at each other, but at like making better passes to one another than they ever have. Mm. And so that's what I see, is that like the jams are more shapely. And that means they don't need to wander in the fucking wilderness for 20 minutes to get to a good idea. So you get the Alpharetta Chalk Dust is 13 minutes of titanic improvisation that you don't recognize as Titanic because it's in a tiny little jewelry box.
Every Chalk Dust, right? I mean, every Chalk Dust goes immediately into the jams. Like, they didn't know, there's no fucking around. Brian, do you want to
think about that?
For my birthday, Chalk Dust Sunday at Dick's. They've played fucking Chalk Dust 8:31 2 years in a row, and Sunday 8:31 they're gonna fucking drop a 5-hour Chalk Dust.
You're the only male. Zach, you're the only male over 30 years old who's talking about your birthday.
No, dude, it's Christmas. It's Fish Christmas.
All right, that's fair, but
think about the
Brian,
first.
I'm Jesus.
The first 4 minutes coming out of the last aspect of the song structure of the Randall Chalk Dust, excuse me. It immediately goes into a sort of melodic peak jam. There's really no transition whatsoever. They shift out of the Chalk Dust theme, and then Trey immediately builds it for 4 or 5 minutes. That's something that they've been working on, at least to my ears, specifically since the Fuck Your Face show. And I think what you're saying, Wally, and I agree with it, the jams are becoming more shapely. They've practiced over the last 2 years getting to the point really quickly and not really wasting anyone's time. And now they're able to not only get to the point, but say more when they get to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Rob?
Yeah.
That was one sort of trend that I picked up on, sort of connects like what you guys are talking about with the like increased amount of segues and songs coming out of nowhere, to my mind, because, and sort of what I learned from following Mike Mott's Maps too last year was, how good they are now at changing keys rapidly, and how good they are at picking up on each other's ideas like almost instantly. And I think, they used that last year in things like the Tahoe Tweezer and throughout the fall as sort of the driving force for jams, where rather than exploring one theme for a long amount of time, they would just cycle through themes really fast, which was, like I've talked about before, it's like super disorienting for somebody raised on like late 90s Fish. That was like, some of those jams are like, they had one good idea and they just explored it for 20 minutes. Now they can put like 10 good ideas into like a 15-minute jam, and each one of them is amazing, and it's almost frustrating that they don't explore some of them longer. But I think they figured out this year that they could use that sort of new power and fluidity to not just find new jams to fall into, but also find songs all of a sudden to just pop into. And I'll go back again to the Ghost in the middle of the Chicago Weekapog, or the Tweezer in the middle of the Fuego on 8-1, or a lot of like the main heart of the Tweezer Fest, which was that the crazy free into tweezer and the simple back into tweezer, back into free. Those kinds of like quick transitions have sort of been unlocked by the way their jamming style is these days, and how purely democratic and how mercurial it is, and how fast they are able to move between different structures.
Can
Can I say something about the jams? I don't. Do you mind, RJ?
Go ahead.
I'm wearing a monocle in honor of Skip Arts. But I was going to say...
You didn't attract enough attention as it was. I'm glad you put on your monocle.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
So, there's a couple of jam segments that, like, on the bigger jams, like Manfuego and Chalk Dust from Randall's, these long, drawn-out things that don't necessarily have, like, peaks, whereas, like, the Randall's Light had, like, 2 distinct peaks, and Spack Fuego had a peak, like a big mountainous volcanic eruption kind of thing. I think a lot of people in the fan base caught on to these. A lot of the what I consider like the oddballs who I get along with, like the Spack Limb by Limb, and the Randall's Bathtub in the first set, and then the Randall's Ghost. There's like these kind of outro, funkier, off-kilter, syncopated. That sound like fall. They sound like a fall jam in the way that like fall 2013, if you think about like the Tweezer from Hampton, the Golden Age from the Light from Atlantic City, the Tweezer from Atlantic City, that are kind of these like off-kilter, your body starts moving in opposite directions, whereas like with the Randalls and the Randall's Chalk Dust and the Manfuego, it's just like a bunch of different groove spaces that they just cycle through. And I think those were, to me, like the more exciting jams because there's a bigger risk there. You're not just developing a groove space. I mean, Phish is so incredible. To me, like the groove spaces like in the Manfuego and the Randall's Chalk Dust are far more compelling, even if they don't have the same impact as Fall 97 jams like Tweezabella or Haley's or AC/DC Bag, but they if you put like Randall's Chalk Dust, not that I would do this, but if you were to put Randall's Chalk Dust or Manfuego against like some of the better jams from Fall 97, I personally want the 2014 style, and I think they're more sophisticated, and I think they're more interesting musically, and I think I'd rather hear 5 different jam styles than 1.5, based in a funk groove or a wah pedal sound. That tends to develop. I mean, those were. I'm not taking anything away from those jams, but to me, the improvisational stuff that really piques my interest. I mean, there's not. What do you say? I mean, Jake Cohen said everything there is to say about the Randall's Chalk Dust, and I'm happy he said it, and I hope he does that for every single long jam going forward, because I learned a lot in his essay. But to me, it's those 3 or 4 minutes of the Spack Limb by Limb, the Randall's Ghost, the last 4 or 5 minutes there, and there's one other one. Oh, the Tweezer, not Mango. I want to say NICU. During the Tweezer-thon, there was like this. They kind of made a mistake, and I was with my good friend Justin Bolognino, and if you don't follow him on Twitter, Jay Bolognino, who was actually giving me a birthday show because he thought that Sunday was my birthday, but and he like turned to me and was like, it's like they made a mistake and kept going with it, and then just went with it, and within a minute they had found a brand new space that they couldn't have found had they been playing Randall's Chalk Dust or Manfuego. And when you throw caution to the wind, to me those are the most interesting and worthwhile improvisational moments, while at the same time I keep listening to Manfuego and I keep listening to the Randall's Chalk Dust, because they seem to me, like Brian said, exactly where Phish is right now, whereas those other jams are like could be an idea of where Phish is going. But like the truth is, they're never going to have 15-minute jams that are all weird and outro like that. That's just not how they operate. I don't know.
Wally, anything to respond to that or add? Your face is frozen. Maybe you're. I know you're here.
Oh, really? Can you hear me?
Yeah, but now you're good.
As we were thinking about this, I was thinking, I'm thinking about the Saratoga Split Open and Melt from last summer, which if Fish 2014 had never happened, I would be perfectly content to just listen to that Split Open and Melt every 30 minutes for the rest of my life. I adore it, and it's a mess. And I'm thinking about like all the, because they just played this tour, we're caught up in the, and specifically I don't want to toot my own horn here, but like I remember writing about it as, they're moving so fluidly between ideas, they're modulating so freely within long jams, they're making a lot of use of the space that's opened up by subtle shifts in a groove, like they're, and that jams just like every 2 minutes somebody has a wacky idea, and they're all just like crashing against each other, like multiple like currents colliding under the surface of water or something. That was a terrible metaphor. Sorry. And I remember all through 2013 and even in like 2011 and 2012, like they were starting. Okay, Deadhead. Yes, that is the Saratoga Split Open and Melt. I remember thinking the last few years and writing a bunch the last few years about how so many they can now bring new ideas into play without it seeming like they're going to play the like wacky rock and roll is for dweebs and we're super smart. So here's like we're going to take rock and roll and we're going to twist it into an nth dimensional fucking non-Euclidean geometry, and then we're going to give it back to you, frat assholes, and you'll dance, and we're gonna make you dance. Like that weird antagonistic side of Fish is gone, and what's left instead is this generous, like we can just dance with whatever wacky ideas are coming forward, and they're coming out with new ideas as frequently and as freely as they did in 1994. Only there's no perversity to it. When it's weird, it's just weird because sometimes a breeze of weird comes by and just lifts you up, and then it sets you down somewhere else. And they don't seem. That's why the idea of them like deliberately entering into weird conversations with fans or having an agenda with their music is a little. It seems a little strange to me because the like evolutionary logic within their sets seems to me so accepting, if that makes sense. And they seem really good at accepting really skillfully. And instead of just like, whatever, man, and sort of rolling with the punches and not also talking back to the new idea or new impulse, like it seems like they can right away enter into a new conversation, accepting what happened 30 seconds ago as the premise, and like moving off of it boldly because they don't have anything to prove and they don't have anything to lose. And I feel like that's actually that wave has been building since they came back, and especially for the last 3 years. And I remember last year feeling like they can just. I remember using the sentence like "this is the new form," and Zach was all excited about that sentence last year. And there's just this idea that if the phrase wants to be 3 bars instead of 4 bars, Fishman doesn't give a fuck. He'll do whatever, and Mike doesn't care. Like Page, like these guys are so adaptable that if they're playing an A and Trey has an idea that's in E or an E flat, they'll just go, and they can all just go so fast that it still feels smooth. And so the resultant style is smoother and less jagged and less angular and less antagonistic, and it just seems like they're all just okay with it. And it invites the audience to be just okay with it as well. That doesn't seem agenda-driven to me at all. That seems enlightened to me, actually, which I'm not, but which I'm excited to feel like they are. I'm not sure what I'm talking about.
Rob?
Someone else talk.
Rob looks pensive / sleeping.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Rob.
No. My feed is probably too choppy to show how much I'm nodding along with everything Wally said.
Not nodding off.
Well, no.
All right, so guys, we probably have time for 1 or 2 more things, and we should let you all get back to your nights. One thing, Zach mentioned Justin. He Justin Bellino, earlier he said, can we all agree that these motherfuckers are trolling us? Wasn't that a big story this tour that they are listening? Anyone have thoughts on that? Particularly maybe Rob, if you do, or anyone, I guess.
Brian.
Rob, you first.
That's kind of been a story for a while.
Yes.
Is it continuation, or is it picking up this tour?
I think it was the most last year, personally. I think no, I didn't feel it as much this year. I don't know if they necessarily need to. I feel like they were trolling us to say, listen, like really, really actually listen and try to understand what we're doing here. You know, Trey yelled at the crowd on New Year's Eve this last year, saying that most of us aren't getting the message.
He didn't say most. He said some of you. He said some.
Yes. You're right. Some of us.
Those people, by the way, they finally got the message this summer.
And that's part of it that I feel like a lot of people finally got it, and I don't think that there's really. I feel like they were trolling us from. I don't know. I think they got a lot of confidence as summer 2012 went along, and Fuck Your Face was a part of that trolling. And then Garden Party, obviously, Poster Nutbag the right way. Most shows spell something, and then all of that tied in with Wingsuit, where they took this big risk towards this fan base that can be so critical in the moment and without really reflecting properly. And they, gave this grand experiment where we're going to take this party night and we're actually going to have a really serious evolutionary moment as a band and as a community. We're going to all step forward together, and some of you aren't going to really like it. And I think some of the funny part, maybe part, and this is just kind of coming to me of how they're trolling us this summer, is it seemed like the big popular takeaway from Wingsuit was Fuego. And then they play Fuego in pretty much every single show this summer. That might have been part of it. Like, if you guys really like that from our album, here you go. You're going to hear it every single night. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling. I know that Rob was asked this question. I jumped in.
They finally turned into the band that plays the single at every show.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think there's something to that I think the challenges that they've issued both to themselves and to us are related to song selection. And it's like one dimension of that is playing Fuego in every city but one this summer. But I was really struck by what they removed the covers for the most part. The covers became like special occasion only, which like really brought back the power to a lot of those covers that they had lost. Like, I was so sick of Boogie on Reggae Woman. Like, 2001 was like kind of in a dead end. There were like a lot of Loving Cup for sure. Like, never needed to hear another Loving Cup encore again.
I love that song.
So they did a great job by like sort of sequestering those and only pulling from it when they really were feeling the need for that cover, which I think was controversial with fans as well. But I mean, these things all came together in. I need to see like the figures on this. This is not the data that we teased, but I wonder how many songs they played this summer versus previous summers. And I think they kind of caught up a lot at the end of the summer by bringing in all these 2.0 songs and like old ballads that they don't play very often. But up until, say, Merriweather, the song pool they were drawing from felt really shallow, which was interesting. I think they are like really into pleasing everybody now and trying to play every song sometimes, and that's what leads to shows like Detroit and why we think Detroit didn't really like succeed. But when you look at the set list, you see a lot of sets that kind of look similar. Like a lot of Carini Waves, a lot of Ghost into Mics or Mics into Ghost.
Which, by the way, the first time they did that was, I think the first Ghost, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Rob. The first Ghost in a Mike's was on 12:30, I think, and so I've appreciated them continuing. I think Mike's and Ghost are like a great 1-2 combo, or to put a big Ghost, or you have a 7-minute Mike's with a 13-minute Ghost is a really good punch. Sorry to interrupt there.
No, it's fine. But yeah, I think that did sort of challenge not only themselves to make maybe the similar strings of songs sound totally different from show to show, but also to challenge fans to like, listen to 12 versions of Fuego this summer and really see how it evolved and how it grew and shrank, and like it's not just a linear process where it becomes like an awesome song every night. Sometimes it'll come back and be standard, and sometimes it'll be big, and like that unpredictability is actually even more fun than if it just got like longer over the course of the summer. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, I think it's more of a challenge to themselves, and it's a challenge to the fans as sort of a byproduct that they don't really care about. But I've said it before, I like when they put limitations on themselves, and I think that's when the most interesting fish happens. So I felt like this summer they did try to do that in some like new and interesting ways.
It's interesting, the idea of the repeats and the shorter rotation. I was looking at the set list before we got on here, and only one song this summer opened 2 separate shows, and that was AC/DC Bag. The rest of the summer had completely unique openers throughout it. Compare that with 2013, 4 different songs opened up at least 2 different shows throughout that tour. 2012, 5 different songs. I don't really know what that means, but I think to me it says that even though they're playing with a smaller song selection, they're trying to figure out different places to put songs. I know that you and I, Rob, at the Detroit show, definitely had a look when they went into Cavern after Weekapaug. It was a really jarring soft seg, but and we have to say seg now. Actually, that's OK Deadhead coined that. But it was really jarring in the moment. But it showed, and it's kind of why the Detroit show. Well, I don't know if I'll really go back and listen to it. I find it to be a really important show within the tour, because there were so many moments within, especially that second set, where they were really taking a chance with an actual song selection. Regardless if it was a repeat, Fuego had been played the night before. That was really the show where you realized they're going to play Fuego in every city. But that Tweezer Fuego Twee Prize, Weekapaug to Cavern, Mike's and the Ghost, there were these song selection choices that were totally unique to the rest of their history, to the rest of 3.0, and for them to do it within the frame of a smaller rotation is, like you're saying, that whenever they're experimenting and challenging themselves, it may not be the best thing that's ever happened, it may not be something that everybody's going to like, but it's going to be really interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should wrap up, guys. It's been like about an hour, so let's end on another question that we just got. What do you think will be the most? Hold on, sorry. Let me look and see how it's.
Is this another Mike unpronounceable H question?
No, I can't.
I
can't find it anymore. Whatever. Someone said, "What will be the most?" Oh, it was Mike again. Sorry. Yeah, it was Mike. What show from this tour do you think will stay with you the longest, and why? And this is your last chance. So make it good. Brian, you want to start?
Sure. I have 3 selections. Sorry. 7-4.
The fuck was that?
Just on a personal level, was like probably the most perfect fish show I saw of the summer. I had the best seats I had the entire summer. That balcony at Saratoga Springs was a revelation to me. It was. I thought that Dick's and MSG were the 2 best places to see fish. I'm now convinced that balcony is the best place to see fish. The section I was in was just going absolutely insane all show long. It was just a really incredible camaraderie. I think I hugged 20 different people throughout the show. I really, really enjoyed that first set. The Reba, I loved the MoMA dance. The 46 Days, I know that I really remembered liking. Split Up and Melt, Squirming Coil. I thought it just had excellent flow to it. It was exactly the kind of first set I would want to see, in that there were some songs that are predictably first set songs, but they were played in really perfect placements, and they just played the hell out of them. And then that second set, nothing else really needs to be said about it. The Fuego, when it started, some guy turned to me and said they'd better jam this out, and I kind of laughed at him. And then when they actually started jamming it out, he turned again and yelled that they're jamming this out. So I was really excited. Just some random Phish fan who understood, the significance of this is the fourth Fuego ever, and obviously they're opening the second set with it at SPAC on 4th of July. They're gonna jam it out. But then for them to do it down with the Z's and a twist and a light and an incredible number line, and I loved everything about it. 720 was my last show, and it was the last night I spent on the road. I left Portland, Oregon on August 13th, 2012, and headed for Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And at that point, I hit the road with my wife for 2 years.
Boring.
And 720.
Wow.
720, 2014 was our last night on the road. And so there was a lot of sentiment. I was there with my brother and my wife. But we were in Chicago. And they played just a killer show. It was the same sort of thing as 7-4. Amazing first set. Second set, I had that excellent wedge, the Ghost. That's probably my personal favorite jam of the summer. And then my last one is 7:30. The second set I will go back to repeatedly throughout the whole August, throughout this whole month before Dick's. Yeah, those are my three. I was just told I was boring by Zach, so I'm going to shut up.
My hair. I'm not losing my fucking hair, Scott.
I love when the trolls are great. The best troll of all is Steve the Vic. He's so great at trolling us, but also actually loving us. Thank you, Steve, for everything. Rob.
Mark Les giving me the shut the fuck up dance card at the MPP Sheraton Pool.
Yeah,
was kind of
that was good.
cool.
Well, that was awesome and appropriate, and that was a wonderful moment. I wish I had captured it on video. Rob, what's the set or show that'll stick with you the most?
I tend to subscribe to attendance bias on shows that stick with me that I listen to the most. So, not to be redundant, but I'm going to pick the third night of Chicago, too, which I ended up seeing by myself. The guy who was going to go with me fell through, and it was the end of like this long, brutal Phish Pitchfork weekend that I have had for 2 years in a row now. And, I thought maybe I was going to be too tired for the show, and I ended up just being in like the perfect headspace for it. And I got all the way up close to the rail. The first set was just really nice all the way through. The second set kind of had a really mellow start, and I'm like, okay, I'm okay with mellow. This will go fine. And then the second half of the second set was just like outstanding and exactly what I wanted. And it kind of fits with what we've been talking about today. That on paper, maybe even like matched up against some of the huge highlights of this summer. The Wedge and Ghost and the first two, Weekapaug and the first two. It might not be like the most sensational run ever of songs, but it fit perfectly for the energy of that night, and definitely fit perfectly for my personal energy of that night. So to be totally selfish about it, it was like exactly what I wanted to hear, and like it's probably the segment I'll listen to the most going forward. If I have to pick a show that I wasn't at, I thought the first night of Merriweather was awesome. It got overshadowed by the second night of Merriweather, but I think the second set they strung together on that night was like really hit a lot of the marks that I think they were trying to hit all summer, though who knows. But creating like this flowing second set with some surprising segues and surprising jams coming out of nowhere, and just like a really like complete 75-minute statement with a hood that wasn't, again, probably the best, most deepest improvisational hood, but I think peaked harder than anything else, any other hood that we heard this summer. So I like that show a lot too.
Rob, I think you identified something really important, and maybe this is one of the bigger themes is like strong, super strong fourth quarters this year. And I remember coming in a few years ago into Phish, and people were saying that like, in 10 and parts of 11, they'd come out in the second set, and you'd see Your Disease, and you'd see a Rock and Roll, but then they'd kind of conk out and get tired or not care or not be comfortable enough to like. The moment when I really felt this was MPP1, which you mentioned. I think it's a super stellar show that I don't even think I've even listened back to, and I want to. Maybe I'll do that tonight. They had played this really great, strong second set already. Everyone was happy. I think it was like Carini Ghost that opened the set, or Carini Ghost. And then I was like, man, if they were to play Light, it was like a 3 or 4 songs later, and it was like Light, 2001 Hood. And I was like, damn. Like, I feel like fourth quarters are more than just Phish's stamina or endurance. I think it's more like if we can consistently produce strong fourth quarters, then we have a better chance at producing complete shows. Because you can't really have a complete show, and to use your term, a successful show or a reconciled show without a pretty strong fourth quarter with like, a late set Sand or a Slave or a Hood, Cavern. And so I think maybe that's an overlooked thing, a slightly overlooked thing and then people were talking about it, which is why I'm mentioning it. Really super strong fourth quarters that if you lined up against any of 12 show or 11 show or even some of the shows from the 90s, would be like, whoa.
Wally, you're up.
Because I was only at the one show this summer, but the Harry Hood from Mansfield is that memory is never going to leave me. And I was saying before we started this that I haven't listened to it since then. It's the only sort of big jam of the summer I haven't listened to at all. I think because I want. Zach was saying, there's nothing wrong with sort of adulterating the memory by adding this secondary, almost orthogonal experience of listening to some soundboard of it, and that's true. But I guess I sort of unconsciously made the decision to hold on to the unadulterated memory, almost uniquely in my Phish listening. But I listen to all the shows that I go to, except for the second one, the Buffalo '96 show. It was just okay. But that one, that memory, it gets harder and harder to have sort of sacred experiences with music for me over time, and I'm so quietly happy to have that one, and I don't actually have words to talk about it. Like I remember.
And shut up.
Well, hold on. Okay, so there's that. There's also the Chicago Wedge, which people were giving it shit, and they just should not. It is pure bliss, and it feels accidentally so well formed. There's a moment where Fishman comes in, like he starts reasserting the Wedge drum beat, and Trey's just not having it. And it feels, instead of it being like Trey's the boss, like do you remember the November 1997 show in Champaign where there's a moment where Trey has just had it up to here with this like immensely long Wolfman's Brother or whatever, so he just starts playing like a quadruple time riff or something and transforms the jam, and everybody in the room was like, oh, that guy put his dick on everybody's face. It's actually his band. This doesn't feel like that. This just feels like, oh wait, Trey's got an idea. Hold on, we'll give this one a try, and everybody just kind of grabs onto it and goes floating with the music, and it just feels so happy to me. But as far as like listening to shows, I don't think there's a show I'll listen to as a show particularly more than any other. It's increasingly like when I look back at Phish's music, it's like I come back to it just to enter a weird. I don't know, just to, not for any musical reason almost, but just to trigger the release of. They say that you can store memories in certain muscles of your body, and this drama teacher at MIT, he was talking about a class a class he was in where they massaged his jaw. He had to partner up with someone, and she massaged his jaw for like 15 minutes, at the end of which he suddenly punched her as hard as he could in the face, and started talking about his dad, his fucked up memories of his dad. And I feel like for the first time maybe in my life, music is starting to have that effect for me. And I just, more so than any, part of the reason I've gotten boring as a Phish commentator here is that that music makes me happy at a deeper level probably than it ever has.
Awesome.
And that's very boring, I apologize.
No, it's not. That's why we go, right?
I don't know.
I mean,
There's probably a million reasons to go.
Look how in love you are with Phish. You just like you have your shit on your hands and you're just happy. All right, guys. Any last comments before we wrap it up? Brian, Rob.
Did we hear what Zach's show was?
I think we did.
Do we care?
They opened with sand, and I like sand.
Mine was 727, but it wasn't because of the music, because it wasn't even my favorite show that I heard this summer. It was just because of the people I was with and the scene and the moment, which is interesting because that's why we go to these things. It's not necessarily about the jams and you know it's not even necessarily about the music. It's about the time you have with the people you're with, which is pretty cliche, but I think is proven again and again with Phish. But
we've all got like really warm and fuzzy about this whole thing, and Zach keeps calling us pussy.
I know. For Zach.
Oh, is that what that hand signal means? That's a vulva you're making with your hands?
Oh, that's a heart. That's a heart.
Oh, it's an upside down heart.
That's not
was the best. MPP because of what Arjun said. We were with our friends. We were dancing. Phish was being ridiculous and making everyone happy and twisting time and space and their own music and referring back to themselves clearly, but also just doing whatever they wanted. And it was more. And you knew you were at one of those shows. You were at one of those, like Tahoe and Fuck Your Face, and I don't even think Randall's 3 got, Randall's 3 kind of, but like MPP 2 is just one of those shows that will live in infamy. Not to say that the segues or jams were even that great, or that the tweezer reached the levels of peakness of the Bomb Factory or Providence Bowie or any of those, Summer '95 shows, but it didn't matter. Because like you were there, and it was 2014 and not 1994, and it was good again. And the next day you heard the very last holdouts on Phishnet like finally come around and say Phish is back. Of course they're 2 years late, and they're spent 8,000 words.
Though, because I feel like in the 3 weeks since that show. And I know we were supposed to cut off, but what you said, RJ, about how that wasn't even your favorite show, it's just your favorite show to be at, in the 2 weeks since it almost seems like in the 24 hours after that show ended, everyone was up in arms about how it was the greatest show, this and that. The old guard from Phish.net came around, and it almost seems to have been so overrated in the immediate moments afterwards that it's kind of lost its lore, and other shows that were underrated from the tour are the ones that people are talking about now. I kind of find that interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen that at all. I still think it's a great show.
Well, that show, the second show at Meriwether Post Pavilion, succeeds on 20-year-old grounds.
Right.
It succeeds in its own terms. It is an amazing fucking night of music, and everybody there saw God and came all over themselves. But if they had played that show in 1994, it also would have made sense. Like it would have been totally understandable in those terms. And those terms there's nothing intrinsically wrong with them, but they've been around a long time, and so it feels like a culmination in a way that. For Phish, for the guys in the band, it probably doesn't have to feel like a culmination that way. It probably just felt like a really great night on the job. You know?
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to release it doesn't need to release a tight muscle for them. We're the ones with the fucking tight, anxiety-ridden problems. You know what I mean? They don't have those problems because they don't want to leave behind a perfect record of their music. They want to have perfect nights. That they're not trying to make perfect tapes. They're not trying to be a perfect band. They just want to be like, if you can be with your three best friends and just play as well as you possibly can and like be as honest as you can, it's not going to make perfect music. It's going to make perfect nights. And they're having them. That's why they're happier than we are. Fucking assholes, man. Not you guys. I mean, just...
All right, we're gonna leave it at fucking assholes.
I think you just wrote the end of Fish criticism right there.
Put that in the book, Wally. All right, guys, thank you for joining. That was a great conversation. I think we broke Fish Twitter, which is fun. Just so everyone knows, the green shirt guy is Brian Brinkman, who's at Suffering Juke. He's back in the United States of America. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thank you.
The blue and white checkered shirt guy is Rob Mitchum, who's at Fish Crit. Thank you, Rob, for joining and sharing your opinions and data. Wally is in the orange t-shirt. What?
We didn't get to see the charts. I'm so sad.
Why don't we post those and everyone can? I mean, Rob and Wally did some great work on Data Everyone. It's worth maybe putting up on a couple of blogs and just we can always talk about it later.
Yeah, let's do it. Can we do that, Rob?
That's a great idea, RJ.
Oh shit!
Fuck you.
Oh, shit.
Everybody, look at these fucking charts.
Wow, Data.
Look at this.
Look at that.
Yeah, it was.
Beautiful. It's just a tease.
Oh.
That's all you get.
Is that a vulva?
Zach, make the vulva shape again. It's just a tease. Make that shape seems relevant.
Wally at Wax Banks, thanks Wally for joining us, and Zach, the baby, thank you for something. All right, guys, let's do this again soon after Dick's. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And let's do this again, except instead of 5 of us, it'll be 5 women.
Perfect. Yes, exactly. All right, we'll do that. All right, later, guys. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.